Session 6 of Project Management. This time we're going to delve into some of the more scientific approaches to project management and look at some of the tools that are involved particularly in project planning.
Slide 2. Let's get back to basics. To ensure that you have a sound grasp of the principles of project management, we'll now review some key issues. Firstly, a project is a time-bounded activity which is usually a one-off rather than an ongoing continuous process. The project environment in which the project takes place includes such factors as geography, the economy, government, resources, subcontractors, suppliers, national culture, organisational strategy, other projects, competitors, customers and users. And all these factors have a bearing on the likely success or otherwise of the project. The project definition involves identifying the end state that project management is trying to achieve, the range of the responsibilities taken on by the project, and the strategy of how the objectives are going to be met. The objectives need to be clear, measurable and quantifiable. The scope of the project is a boundary setting exercise which attempts to define the dividing line between what the project will do and what it won't do. And the scope of the project is formalised in the project specification, and the strategy defines the general approach to the project. Finally, key milestones must be identified to enable reviews of quality, cost and time issues to be identified. So, before moving on to the next slide, just give some thought to the study questions. Did you consider all the project environment issues when you initiated the current project in which you're now working? How well defined was your project specification? Were your project objectives fairly well defined? Was the scope of the project well defined? How about the specification? The project strategy? And the importance of milestones. Did you take all these issues into account? Slide 3. Project planning is a key part of successful project working. It determines the cost and duration of the project, level of resources required and the duration of the project, the allocation of work and resources, the ability to monitor progress and assess the impact of changes. There are 5 clearly defined stages to the project management process. Firstly, identify activities, then estimate times and resources needed, identify relationships and dependencies, identify schedule restraints, and then create the schedule. A very useful explanation of the principles of project management and control is given in the book Operations Management by Nigel Slack, Stuart Chambers and Robert Johnson, and the full reference to this book is given in the bibliography slide at the end of this session. We will outline some of the issues presented by these authors during the rest of this session. However, the main emphasis of this module of 10 sessions is the human aspect of project management and leadership. One of the reasons for the shift in emphasis from planning to the human issues is that computer software packages have been created during the past few decades which handle most of the technical aspects of project management and control. Project planning and control, very much the mechanical side, we are focusing on the human side. And in reality, most of the problems that occur today tend to be in the area of the human aspects. So, before moving on to the next slide, just give some thought to the study questions. How effective have you been at the project planning process with your current projects? How effective were you at working through the 5-stage process of identifying activities, estimating time and resources, identifying relationships and dependencies, identifying schedule restraints, and creating a workable schedule? Slide 4. Project control. Project control is an important issue we have to factor into our project management processes. We need monitoring tools which are appropriate to the particular project. We also need to work at gaining and maintaining the commitment of all stakeholders to the monitoring process. And this involves discussion, planning, doing and reviewing cycles as a continuous process. We need to use targets and milestones effectively, and it's useful to create achievement graphs to show in a visual format the progress being made with the project. And on the human side, we need to work towards creating a high-performing team, and one of the ways of doing this is to create the super team charter. And we're going to discuss this in the next slide. However, before moving on, please give some thought to the following study questions. Firstly, do the monitoring tools you use for your current project work as well as you would wish? Are all stakeholders committed to the use of these tools? Is there an ongoing continuous process of discussion, planning, doing and reviewing cycles? Do you use targets and milestones effectively? Are achievement graphs being created? And finally, are you creating a high-performance team? Slide 5. The Super Team Charter. High-performing teams need to be almost obsessive in the pursuit of success and have high expectations of themselves and others. They need to demonstrate respect for all stakeholders and give early warning of possible problems, regardless of the political implications which may exist. Team members need to work hard to keep each other up to date with progress, and when things go wrong, each member needs to move from blame frame to outcome frame. That is, focusing not on whose fault it is, but how are we going to work towards getting some successful outcomes. The members need to represent the project and its team positively, both inside and outside the organisation. The visible team members need to be engaged in valuing, involving and being open with invisible team members. It's important that each team member understands how their role fits in with others. And finally, it's important that each team member particularly, is open about the situation where performance does not match aspiration, and then ensuring that appropriate action is taken to get things back on track. So let's just give some thought to the whole question of the Super Team Charter. Each Super Team Charter would be individual, but based on some of the ideas that we've covered in the slide. So firstly, how would your team respond to the idea of creating their own Super Team Charter of how they're going to work together? What factors would make the charter specific to that team? Are there any additional factors you would suggest would be useful in the Super Team Charter created for your team? Slide 6. Network planning. Now, network planning is a complex process which involves identifying all tasks and estimates, together with being aware of restrictions on start and completion dates. Part of the planning process involves identifying parallel activity, identifying the critical path, and taking into account resource issues. Pages 524 to 530 in Operations Management by Slack, Chambers and Johnson gives a comprehensive account of network planning, and that's going to form your assignment for this particular slide. Your study assignment is to work through pages 524 to 530 of Operations Management by Slack, Chambers and Johnson to gain an awareness of the detail side of network planning. Slide 7. CPM, Critical Path Method. This identifies the shortest time for project completion, and an excellent example is shown on page 84 of Project Leadership by Briner, Geddes and Hastings. This is referred to in the bibliography. This network diagram on page 84 shows the key issues of events, numbers, earliest start and latest finish times, and the critical path is clearly identified and defined in this network diagram. And another excellent description with examples of critical path method is shown in operations management, as already referred to in the previous slide, this time pages 536 to 539. And this includes a section on calculating float, which relates to the ability to change the timings of activities in various parts of the project to accommodate resource and other issues. So your study assignments for this slide, slide 7, please work through the example on page 84 of Project Leadership by Briner, Geddes and Hastings. Study assignments. Please work through the example on page 84 of Project Leadership by Briner, Geddes and Hastings, and then work through pages 536 to 539 in Operations Management by Slack, Chambers and Johnson. These are both quoted in the bibliography. Slide 8. Time estimates. Now there are many types of estimate that we can use in project management: ballpark estimates, worst case, best case, and so on and so forth. PERT gave us a mathematical approach which gives optimistic, a most likely, and a pessimistic estimate. And using basic statistics, one approach to estimates is based on the formula TE, the expected time, equals TO, which is the optimistic time, plus 4 TL, the most likely time, plus TP, which is the pessimistic time, all divided by 6. You can see this in the slide. And page 542 of Operations Management shows how this beta probability distribution can be developed into a comprehensive analysis of means and variances throughout a network. Your study assignment for this slide is this. Please work through pages 541 to 543 of Operations Management by Slack, Chambers and Johnson to develop your awareness of the statistical processes which can be used for the estimate process. Slide 9. Project Finance. Now, the project leader and manager does not need to be an accountant. However, a sound grasp of the basics of finance is useful, and there are two possible strands to this issue. Detailed financial controls need to be organized with the finance department of the organization in order to draw on their expertise. However, a growing area of training and development is finance for non-financial managers, and the project leader and manager with high aspirations would do well to take part in one of these course programs, which are widely available. An internet search will provide a number of possibilities. An awareness of financial issues is both useful in project working and in normal operational management. Capital investment in the project is important, and there are many ways that capital can be raised, including from within the organization, from public funds, from joint ventures, from external sponsorship, and from venture capitalists. It is worth assessing all possible sources of funds for projects, particularly if internal resources are limited. PFI, Private Finance Initiative, has become a key issue in many areas on the basis that involvement of the private sector with the public sector will promote innovation and service quality. It also can promote whole life costing, meaning that the contractor is responsible for creating an optimal solution in terms of quality, cost and time. As in all areas of business, cash flow management is important, and monitoring of all financial aspects is fundamentally important to ensure that the project is sustainable. It's suggested that the project and leader and manager looks at finance books focusing on the application to project working rather than in its widest sense. There are so many books on the market that one could get swamped with possibilities. So your study question for this slide, slide 9, how competent do you feel you are at handling the finance of your project? How tightly do you manage cash flow? is each member of your project team aware of the financial picture? Finally in this session, Slide 10, Handling Resource Constraints. As Slack, Chambers and Johnson suggest in Project Management, pages 543 to 546, the logic which governs network relationships is primarily derived from the technical details of the project and its specification issues such as quality, cost and time. However, the availability of resources may impose its own constraints, which can materially affect the relationships between activities. For example, using float and restructuring, a network diagram may result in a reduction of individuals involved in a particular phase of a project from, say, 8 people to 2 people, simply by rescheduling the activities slightly. Now, in Operations Management by Slack, Chambers and Johnson, pages 543 to 546, there are some useful examples of the process of handling resource constraints. In particular, the process of crashing networks is discussed, which is a process of reducing time spans on critical path activities so that the project is completed in less than the planned time. Just see Operations Management, page 545. So your study assignments for this last slide of Session 6. Work through pages 543 to 546 of Operations Management to gain a sound foundation awareness of the process of handling constraints. Then continue to look at the process of crashing networks on page 545 of Operations Management. Now, before closing this session, let's move on and have a look at the bibliography and just make a few comments. Finally, to finish off Session 6, let's just have a word about the references and bibliography used for this particular session. The key text is Operations Management by Nigel Slack, Stuart Chambers and Robert Johnson, published by Prentice Hall, a very, very comprehensive book on the whole question of service operations management as well as project management. A book we've already used quite a bit is Project Leadership by Bryony, Geddes and Hastings. And then there are a couple of additional things particularly involved with project finance that are well worth looking at. The first one is a guide to the project management body of knowledge, and you might look up the Project Management Institute on the internet. And then Project Finance for Construction and Infrastructure, Principles and Case Studies. Quite a complex text, but certainly one which will enhance your awareness of the financial side of projects. So that's the end of Session 6, and I look forward to speaking with you in Session 7. Thank you.